All right, so this is our female section, and we each one of these women are unique in their own way. We have this woman here, Beatrice Latham Stevenson, who was in the OSS, which was the predecessor of the CIA in World War II. She was stationed in England, and she
I know, I have it.
okay, and she actually worked with the French during in the resistance in World War II. And as Europe was liberated, her and her husband actually drove through parts of Europe and experienced all these great things. And she wrote initially about 65 pages about her exploits. And then her daughter came in with some more. She wrote another 30 pages that she found. And the woman was an extraordinary writer. She wrote about experiences going to Switzerland, going through Germany, just all over Europe as it was liberated. So this is her uniform, and she's got her OSS pin right here. And her husband was a Canadian that she met in the office, also working with the OSS. And she lived about 2 miles from the museum. So she's a local West Haven woman. As is this woman over here, Helen, who was a nurse on a hospital ship in the Pacific. And she actually met her husband on the USS Bonneville. And I just love the uniform. I love the bullion work. Some of these Navy uniforms are beautiful in the way they're designed, and the bullion work on the Navy Eagle is just outstanding. So I always just love the way it looks. This woman here I found in Tampa. I was at a antique shop. When I go on vacations, I don't go on normal vacations. I go out looking for stuff, and my wife and daughter sit by the pool. So while they were sitting by the pool, I was at an antique shop, and I found this woman who was actually a parachute rigger during World War II, and I made an offer. And what happened was I didn't think they accepted it, so I was getting on a plane to get back to Connecticut, and they called me when I was in Tampa Airport, and they said, "We accepted your offer, come pick it up." And I said, "I'm sorry, I'm going home." So I ended up sending them down a check, and they ended up sending it to me. But this, what I found is it was a suitcase, and it had everything that she would have worn, everything. So we put together the mannequin based on what she wore, and a parachute rigger was very important because she made sure that the parachutes worked for the people that were using them. I know I'd want to have somebody pretty competent doing that for me if I was jumping out of a plane. This woman here was a World War II nurse, and there's her daughter right there with Vietnam slant pocket, Grenada era HVT. The woman on the end was just a recent addition. And I know she doesn't really look like a drill sergeant, but she is from 1979. She almost looks like an airline stewardess in a way. We all commented about it. But it's a neat uniform. We have an African-American nurse. Carolyn actually donated this uniform to us. And she had a nice afro at one point, and the people in the museum thought it was just too much. And I knew women from that era. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and they had beautiful hair. So it had a better afro on it than it has now. So they scaled it back a little bit to my disapproval, but she looks great. So, and then here are all accoutrements that women would have worn: shoes, hats, whatnot.
Unmentionables.
I'm not mentioning it. All right, if you want to come out here, this is kind of where we start when people come in to do tours. This is kind of a snippet or just a small sample of some of the things you would find in the museum. We have a lot of painted 26th Division World War I helmets. We kind of focus on the 102nd Division in its inception in 1917 at Yale Field. So as a result, we have a lot of painted helmets. I think we're missing about 7 or 8 of them. And I'm very fortunate. I have a picker I work with that finds me just about everything I need. So I'm very lucky in that respect. But we have a lot of interesting things in here. We have Marlene Dietrich, the Andrews sisters signed, Betty Grable, Elvis, of course, Lieutenant Dang, just a couple to mention. This is a nice piece of trench art here that one of my friends donated, and we put a helmet on it. And we'll get into that. We have a display of all trench art in another part of the museum. So this is where things start. This is kind of where we do our introductions, and then we take you into the area by the Revolutionary War. So come in here. So in the Revolutionary War, a lot of things happened in New Haven and a lot of people aren't aware of. Do people know about Powder Day, April 22nd, 1775? Benedict Arnold actually went to the elders in the city of New Haven and requested ammunition to go up and support our troops up at Lexington Concord, and they refused them. So he threatened to break down the stockade to get the ammunition, and they eventually gave in, and he went up with about 40 members of the 2nd Governor's Foot Guard, because we had 2 foot guards at that time, because New Haven was capital of Connecticut, and so was Hartford. So it switched a few times. But so he went up to Cambridge, Mass, actually, and what they were doing is they were giving a killed in action British soldier back to a British officer, and he commented, he said that the 2nd Governor's Foot Guard was the best dressed unit on the field. So that was pretty impressive. Their uniforms must have been really well detailed at the time. So another thing that we focus on too is the invasion, the 1779 invasion of New Haven. And actually the British actually came through here and came right through the center of West Haven and up Forest Road and then into New Haven. And they camped out there on the 4th of July in 1779. And they were supposed to burn the town down, but they didn't. They were talked out of it. So one of the generals commented and said it was too pretty of a place to burn. But there was a son-in-law of General Tyron, who was the commanding general of the British forces. And he actually went to Yale. He was a 1755 graduate of Yale. His name was Chandler, and he was in the King's Regiment that landed in Morse Cove. And he was a son-in-law of Tyron, and rumor has it that he talked them out of burning New Haven. So what happened was they actually do what soldiers do in cities. They created a lot of havoc. And New Haven at the time had a large supply of India rum because it was one of the biggest seaports in New England. So the townspeople thought, well, let's just give them the rum. Soldiers and rum, that's a real good combination. So the soldiers were so intoxicated that they were ordered to sleep on the green on their rifles that night. They wanted to go back into their ships, but they wouldn't let them do it. And furthermore, the ships it was low tide, so the ships were on their side. So they couldn't leave, so they had to stay in town overnight. Then the next morning they got in their ships, they left, they went and they burned Fairfield down. And they got back in their ships, they went over to Norwalk and burned Norwalk down. And the reason why they took great pride in burning Norwalk down is because that's where rumor has it that Washington had his Culpeper spy network. And Tyron sat on the hill. There was a hill that he sat on in a rocking chair and he watched town burn. And they got in trouble there because they actually burned a church, and they weren't supposed to burn churches down at the time. But there was a communication issue between the Hessians, which were mercenaries working with the British, and the British that were in town, and they had a problem. They didn't understand what was going on, and they actually burned the church down, and they got a lot of flack for that. So we have a couple of artifacts here. We actually have a sword that was picked up in West Haven that I believe belonged to the Hessians that came through here in 1779. We have a nice image of it, shows the invasion and where the British landed. The British actually landed by Chicks in West Haven. A lot of people think they landed by Jimmy's. They didn't. They landed down the road a little ways. So there was an area by Chicks that they landed in, and Thomas Paine, who we depict right here, was the patriot that kind of warned everyone in West Haven. They didn't believe that the British were actually coming through because they'd seen British ships go by between Newport and New York City, and they never really stopped much. But this not in 1779. So those are the two things that we kind of focus on when we bring people through the Revolutionary War. All right, and we'll go into the Civil War area, which you're probably all very interested in. One of our members, Herb Moy, put this tent together, and it actually shows what our soldiers would have slept in on the field. It's a Civil War era tent. And we also have a mannequin done with the Christian Commission, which were the predecessors of our nurses. We have a Confederate from the 14th Georgia. We have a African American that served in the 29th Connecticut. Connecticut's one of Connecticut's African American regiments. It was organized at Vine Point in New Haven. If you go over the Q Bridge, you can actually see the area. It's down where the baseball fields are down there. And they actually have a few monuments in place where they were organized. And then on the other side, we have different types of ordnance. We have a Sharps rifle. We have different types of bullets. We have a drum here that was carried by the oldest surviving veteran in New Haven, Civil War veteran, Charlie Douglas. He was 102 years old when he passed. And he was a drummer boy for the 15th Connecticut during the Civil War. And we actually have a picture of him playing his drum in front of the GAR Hall before it closed in 1944. So New Haven had 3 GAR halls. They had the Stenoir, the Merwin, and the Admiral Foote. I have a lot of things from the Admiral Foote GAR Hall because about almost 10 years ago, I had a woman call me, and her father had cleaned out the Admiral Foote GAR Hall before it closed. So he brought everything home to his house, and he lived over by Winchester Manufacturing, where the Winchester factories were located. And I went to this house, and it was like American Pickers, but all Civil War. It was incredible. There was so much Civil War memorabilia stacked up in that house. I loaded up my vehicle 5 times and brought most of it here. So the first thing that got me there was this drum. And she offered this drum to me for $700. And it's a great deal for a Civil War identified drum. So I couldn't refuse it. And that opened the door to all this other great stuff. This cabinet came out of there. I carried it down from the 3rd floor. All these medals came from there. One of the best things that we got out of the lot was there's a sign-in book from the GAR Hall. And what they used to do is every time they dedicated a monument, they would have dignitaries come in, veterans, Civil War veterans, and they would come into the GAR Hall and they would sign in. So in this book, which was actually not far away from where that thing was located there, we have signatures of William Tecumseh Sherman, Phil Sheridan, F.D. Grant, which was Grant's son, William McKinley, 3 years before he was assassinated, was in New Haven. And one of my favorites, John Singleton Mosby, was in New Haven as well. So this book, the original book is there. This book was actually on a 3rd floor in this house. And I got it out of a bureau that if you looked up through the roof, you could see clouds. So it was raining in the room. It got moisture in the room. So basically, I was able to get that book out of there, and I also found a 36-star flag in the bureau as well. So that all ended up here. Here's some more. Here's the original book here. And Carolyn knows a lot about this frock coat that we have here, John Harpen Riggs. It's an original frock coat. And people ask me all the time, Ed, why are they so small? Well, first thing I say to them is, we never had McDonald's back then. And furthermore, if you don't have a car, you'll walk everywhere you go. Or if you're lucky, you can ride a train or a horse. These people lived off the land. You know, they were actually smaller, they were leaner, and in some respects better shape than people today. They didn't live as long, but they were physically smaller. And that's kind of what I tell people, you know, because they just don't, you know, they can't, well, of course, none of us were around back then, so we don't really, we kind of read about it, but.
This gentleman, John Harpen Riggs, was from Seymour, Connecticut. His house is still there. His parents' house is still there, and his grandparents' house is across the street. The original house was where the Seymour Historical Society now is. Miss Matthews threw the old house down and built her big brick house that is now the Historical Society in 1940. This gentleman lived on Bungay Road. He's in the 7th Connecticut. He's at Fort Wagner. Saw an awful lot of combat. And you can see him in 1917 right here in the Memorial Day Parade in Seymour wearing his frock coat, which you see there with his U.S. buckle. His letters, if you want to see some really great Civil War letters, his letters are in the New Haven Museum on Whitney Avenue. And I think we did a program on him at Housatonic Civil War Roundtable a number of years ago, and he was quite the character. Just to compare him to like kids today.
Yeah, from what you were saying, he was kind of rambunctious.
Yes, he was kind of rambunctious. He kept saying to his father, "Send me cigars and brandy." Because
Cigars.
his father was distilling brandy up on Great Hill Road. And you know, he was like a young buck about town, but after he was in the service for a few months, he wrote home to his father, "You might as well sell my buckboard, because I can't use it." Just like the kids would say when we were kids and they were all in Vietnam,
right?
"You might as well sell my car. I don't need it." So
yeah, how many people have you know, said, well, I had this great baseball collection. I had all these Mickey Mantles. I came home, well, not Mickey Mantles, but back then, my grandmother gave them away, or my mother threw them out, you know, and you know, so we hear that story all the time. So it's just funny the way it happens. But so this is all things that were in the GAR hall. See this cannon down here? A lot of people don't know what that cannon is used for. They just think it's decorative. But in a GAR hall, what they did is they used to vote with the cannon. And if you agreed to what they were proposing, you rolled a white ball, white marble down the breach. If you disagreed, you rolled a black marble down the breach. And when I first got it, I was like, what is this? Is this a Civil War toy or something? And my good friend in Gettysburg actually enlightened me and told me what it was used for. And I happened to be at a show in Gettysburg with Carolyn, and one of the dealers had one on the table, and he looked at me, he says, "You know what that's for?" And I said, "I sure do." "Well, why don't you tell me?" And you know, of course, I was able to tell him what it was used for. But
you don't want to know about, because that means you blackballed.
yeah, right. So here's actually a flag that was a Ninth Corps Guidon, and Carolyn helped me do a little research on this person. His name was Peter Bowman, and his name was spelled 3 different ways. And he was with the 15th Connecticut, and they were actually at Fredericksburg at the time, I believe, when this flag could have been carried. And the 15th was in reserve back then. They didn't see much action at Fredericksburg. I believe they lost 3 people to friendly fire. They had a New York battery behind them shooting up at Malvern Hill, and they lost three soldiers. But this actually came out of the Gloucester Street Armory, so it's pretty interesting.
We saw a lot of action in the Overland campaign.
Yeah. Then we have these albumens of Fort Sumter, the various stages of bombardment. We actually have a Gallagher carbine that came in, and since Rich isn't here, I'll do something very, very quick on a gun. It's not going to be a Civil War gun, but Carolyn's going to help me and demonstrate how it was fired. But this actually came in about a month ago, and this was purchased. Does anybody remember Bannerman's? This was actually purchased by somebody in Bannerman's in Manhattan. He had a real elaborate. It was a beautiful, very well stocked Civil War surplus, World War I surplus facility, and guys used to get on the train, buy a gun in New York, get on the train, and ride back to New Haven with it. Now, you couldn't do that nowadays, but back then, bringing something like this home was not a big deal. So the Gallagher carbine actually came from Bannerman's, and it was brought back home, and it also came in with that Confederate cavalry saber that's in that case over there that was identified to a soldier in the 16th Virginia that I believe was at Gettysburg. I'm not quite sure if he was there, but I know the unit was there at one point. So as we leave the Civil War area, we kind of get into Nogales, and we talk about the 1st and 2nd Connecticut. And they were down in Nogales chasing around a famous outlaw called Pancho Villa. And they didn't get him, but they learned some valuable soldiering techniques while they were down there that they would use in a couple years when they went over to Europe. While they were in Nogales, that's where the term doughboy, one of the theories on the term doughboy originated. A few guys from the 2nd Connecticut came out of the desert, and they were covered in this white sand. And someone went up to them and said, "Hey, you guys look like you were just in a bakery. You look like doughboys." So I kind of believe it. I think the story sounds good. So it's an interesting thing, and people ask you that all the time. Well, how do these things? Where do these names and these titles come from? And you hear these stories through the years, and you kind of stick with what you believe to be true. So they came back up around 1917, and actually these colored images of the Spanish War. Remember that bureau I was telling you about? They came out of that house. They were all rolled up. So I have a friend that owns an art gallery and had them mounted on acid-free backing so that they would be preserved. But they're beautiful images, and the colors are really nice on them. So they come back to Connecticut in 1917, and they end up going to Yale Field, and that's when the 102nd Infantry Regiment was organized. So that's what we basically focus on in terms of our presentations. And we have things that are related to Connecticut soldiers here. I mean, this guy was from South Meriden. He actually lost his leg in Europe during World War I. What's really interesting about this, I found this image, and the soldier's on the left, but the old guy on the right's taking a bite out of a sandwich. I just thought it was kind of comical, so I blew it up and featured it in the display. Here we have an original battle map from the Battle of Sespre, which the 102nd fought in. We actually have a Distinguished Service Cross that belonged to the highest decorated soldier from Orange, Connecticut in World War I, Harold Brown. He was in the 102nd. We have an image depicting the Battle of Sespre, and the way it started was a few cooks were trying to subdue a few Germans with meat cleavers, believe it or not, of all things. And they called the unit in, and guys from the 102nd pushed the Germans out of the town. Here's a a diorama. We have a gentleman that makes dioramas from us, and they're just phenomenal. They're so well detailed. And this kind of shows no man's land, what it's like, would have been like to fight in the trenches. And next time you come back, this will be illuminated. We're getting outlets put on this side of the museum. So as we come through here, there's more World War I related items. We have a whole Yankee Division roster here of everyone from New Haven and the 102nd that basically served. And if you see a star next to a name, it means that they were killed in action. And remember, I was telling you about the painted helmets. We have a couple of different style painted helmets here attributed to the 26th Division. The 102nd Machine Gun Battalion was, and this is a very interesting story. Does everybody know about the Polis that owned the Poli movie theaters? Well, Mr. Poli sent his driver down into Fairhaven to recruit for the 102nd Machine Gun Battalion from the Italian section. So a lot of guys in the unit are from the Italian section in Fairhaven. So and that was very common back then. If you were affluent, you could sponsor a unit and send them overseas. I read somewhere where Machine Gun Parker, who laid the cover fire for Teddy Roosevelt going up San Juan, his Gatling guns were bought for the unit by the Tiffany Company. So the Tiffany family bought the Gatling guns for them. I'm sure they were pretty expensive back then. And if you come over here, we talk a lot about Stubby, and I have a beautiful mannequin of Stubby that I worked with a person from who does a lot of work with Disney out west, and it took her 2 years to do it, and we based it on the original Stubby that was located. It's located now in the Smithsonian. And I told her I wanted a dog that was smiling. I wanted a good-looking dog, not a dog that had a snarl on his face. So I think she really hit it out of the park. So in 1917, Stubby actually met Joseph Conroy, on Yale Fields, and they smuggled him onto the troop ship. He got off the troop ship in France, and an officer spotted him and said, "Hey, you can't have an animal here." And they taught Stubby to get up on his hind legs and salute the officer. So the officer looked at him and said, "Oh, yeah, you got to be our mascot. If you taught him to do this, he's got to be our mascot." So this dog could smell the difference between Americans, Germans, French. And what happened was he actually captured a German that was nosing around our trenches. He bit him in the back end and waited for a few of our soldiers to come over. And the German actually had an Iron Cross First Class on his pocket, and they took it off and they pinned it on the back of his tail. So our Stubby actually has an Iron Cross First Class. So when his tail wagged, the Iron Cross would wag. The jacket that he wears was made by the women of Chateau Thierry because he actually warned them of a gas attack, of all things, believe it or not. So in thanks, they made this beautiful jacket for him, and it has the Yankee Division patch on it, his discharge stripe. Now, people refer to him as Sergeant Stubby. He was never officially given that rank. Those 3 stripes up there are all service stripes, each one being 6 months in the combat zone. So I think she really hit it out of the park, though. He's a beautiful dog, and we waited a long time for him, but it was well worth it. All right, if you come over this way, we can look at
I don't know which way to go sometimes.
some of the World War I uniforms that we have. This is the 102nd. They were from Massachusetts National Guard unit. That guy back there was in the 102nd. He's a captain. This guy here was in the 102nd. They were from New Haven in southern Connecticut. I stuck this guy in the middle because I loved his uniform. You very rarely see corduroy uniforms. This is a specially made uniform that I'm sure he bought over in France. And most doughboy uniforms are wool, or they're like a khaki material. This actually is made out of like a denim, and it's just beautiful. And he was in the 103rd, or Field Artillery. This guy here was in the 103rd, which was from New Hampshire and Maine. And this guy here, this guy is decked out. We have so much for him, and I don't ask me why. We just had a lot of things donated from the 104th Infantry Regiment, and they were from Western Massachusetts and throughout New England. So we have a beautiful, and if you notice, they all had different painted helmets. The 102nd actually has, people tend to think that that's an elm tree on the front of that helmet, but realistically, it's the charter oak. And here's the trench art we were talking about that I showed you in the beginning of the museum. Right around 1918, 1919, when the war was over, there were thousands of these shells, and our guys had a lot of time on their hands. So what they would do is they would ornately carve them, and a lot of times you find them in pairs, and you could still find them in antique shops. They're not super expensive. Women put flowers in them. The bigger ones, you could put canes in them and different things like that. 82nd during World War I. They were not an airborne unit yet. And I often ask people, do you know who the famous Medal of Honor winner was from the 82nd? And then we look over here and we see Sergeant York. And here's another example of how Hollywood gets it wrong. We didn't have jets in World War I. And we didn't have a tank. We didn't have Sherman tanks in World War I. So Hollywood at times, if they don't have the right research people, I mean, the war movies nowadays are pretty good. I mean, they're very well done, but sometimes they don't always get it right. So here are more examples of uniforms. This is a trunk lot here. This is very popular in the 70s and 80s, where collectors would display a trunk lot where you'd open it up and they'd have everything that belonged to the soldier. So that was a very popular way to display your collection. This came out of a house in Stamford. A woman called me and she had about 30 dioramas. And I got into her basement, I looked around, she goes, well, I'd like to give this all to you. And I said, well, where am I gonna put it? I just don't physically have the room. So I found this up against the wall and I just loved it. And her husband actually painted a lot of these things, which I find hard to believe. I don't think I'd be able to do one or two of them. I mean, it takes a tremendous amount of patience to sit here and to paint all these things. So just incredible detail. Here's an example of a streamer that was dropped out of a plane, a German plane near trenches in France. It was picked up by a guy in the 102nd. God only knows what was in that pouch. It must have been important if it was dropped. So it's an example of what they would drop out of a plane, a biplane. And then we get into food that was used at various stages of different conflicts. People ask me, Skittles, yeah, the Skittles were issued at some point. Not in the Civil War, but they were issued later, much later on. We look at our home front items. Home front items are very popular, very collectible, things that keep the war effort going at home. This beautiful machine gun here came out of Shelton, actually. I went to a woman's home, and she had a bunch of things she wanted me to look at. And she had this tin-made machine gun. Now, most of these are made in Japan. This one actually is American-made, and it still actually has a little flame that comes out. It works. So that was like one of the best things I picked up that month, you know, because I love these 60s era toys. So, and then here we have a Western Union uniform. You didn't want to see these people come to your house in World War II. They usually were the bringers of bad news. So we have the bag and we have the tunic. Civil defense. Most people know what that is. They were around the home front to protect the people at home. Carol and I were just talking about air raid shelters and hiding under your desks in school. You know, we were very worried we were going to get hit with an atomic bomb back in the 60s and 70s. So, you know, civil defense is a very important part of, you know, of our country. You know, Rich isn't here, so I'm going to do something short on a gun, and I want Carolyn to come over and help me out with this. Now, this is a 1919 air-cooled machine gun. This was made by John Moses Browning, and it was developed initially to be used as a tank weapon. They needed a machine gun to mount on tanks. It had an 18-inch barrel. It wasn't that accurate, so the M4 version, it was made for infantry use. And I don't know if you've ever seen or heard of John Basilone, the hero of Guadalcanal. He actually fired something similar to this, but his was water cooled. So basically, when he came back to retrain troops, he was training them on how to fire these things. And there was a way that you could fire them from the hip. They actually fabricated a bail for these things. So I'll show you how it worked.
Every teenage boy who comes to the museum wants to do this.
Including Carolyn.
Including Carol.
So Carolyn, you have to actually shoot from the hip and you spray and pray. And that's basically how it was done. Until you run out of ammunition.
There you go.
Thank you, Carolyn.
It's not light.
No, it isn't. No, it was, I believe it's 36 pounds. So it's pretty heavy. They were made by, I got my cheat sheet here, so let me go to my cheat sheet because it's not something that I talk about it, but I don't get really specific with it. So basically, they were made by three manufacturers: Buffalo Arms, Rock Island Arsenal, and Saginaw Steering Company, which was a division of General Motors. So GM actually made machine guns back then. They made 439 pounds, sorry, 31 pounds. Chambered in 30-06. Effective range was 1,500 yards. And they were chambered in 9 rounds, different rounds overall. So they did a 6.5 by 55. I don't know if any of you ever shot a Swedish Mauser. It's a very sweet rifle. I guess they kind of chambered it for a couple of different, depending upon what country being used in too. So great machine gun, around for a long time, tried and true, worked really well. So we love having it. It's not a real gun. It's totally de-wadded. It's not, no one can shoot it. Doesn't fire. And then during the World War II section, we have the 101st Airborne, which you're probably all aware of what they did during World War II, jumping at Normandy and whatnot. We have an 82nd Division, and now this is when the 82nd was really an airborne unit, not like when Sergeant York was there. This guy was from Derby, actually. His name was Bill Gambasini. And he actually, right before the end of the war, he and his unit were taking out an armored car, and he had the helmet shot off his head. And he survived. He didn't get wounded, he just got shot off his head. So it was a great story, something I really liked. I actually ended up buying this whole uniform, everything with it from his family. They're from Naugatuck, but he was from Derby. And then, what's that? Where? Oh, the rope?
Yeah.
Oh, the overseas cap?
Oh, okay,
What do you mean? What's on his head? What am I missing?
okay.
Oh, what am I missing? Okay. We have a British display, British World War II items. They were an ally of ours. We have an Italian display. People ask me, well, why are these uniforms made like this? You think of Italians being great tailors, you know, making phenomenal suits that fit perfectly. that looks like it was made in a garage. And that was actually used on the Russian front, believe it or not. You can only imagine that guy probably froze his tail off. So, and then we're attempting to put together an Italian partisan here. I just have to get the right kind of hat for it. I'll make it look like Michael Corleone back then, you know, when they were guarding them back in Sicily. And then we have Japanese related items. We actually have a Japanese landing force soldier here, which is their Marine. We have a naval dirk here. We have a Japanese medical kit. This is a great grouping here. I love records. Carolyn and I we love this kind of stuff. This came in actually last week. The veteran actually put this together. And this is a synopsis of all of his, you know, when he served. I mean, there's articles in here. There's his high school diplomas in here. I mean, it's just a wealth of knowledge. There's his high school diploma from New Haven High School. Look at the size of that thing. Just a great grouping. The guy was in the 28th Division in World War II.
The telegram they sent home when he was wounded is also in there.
Yeah. And this actually came in a couple years ago, this Japanese light machine gun. Believe it or not, this guy used to have tag sales and put it on his front lawn, and people tried to buy it from him. And he was a Seavey. He brought it back from World War II. The gun is totally, it looks like a real gun, but it's totally dewadded. The receiver is all welded shut, and there's all lead in the barrel, so it cannot shoot. It just looks really good. But can you imagine going to a tag sale and seeing that on the front lawn? And this French 75 millimeter cannon was actually, 5 of them were given to Yale, and they were given to them to train our troops in artillery tactics. This French uniform here, the interesting thing about him is that he actually has a Yankee Division overseas stripe on his left sleeve. And I seem to think that this guy was a liaison to the 26th when they were training at Yale Field, or he could have even gone overseas with them. But that was found in Texas. My picker found that for me. Anything Yankee Division, anything 27th Connecticut, 15th Connecticut, he just finds it for me, you know, and then we work out whatever we're going to spend. So, but I'm blessed to have them. And well, you all know about German stuff. There's a lot of it around. We won. That's why there's a lot of it. We don't prominently display it. We just put some examples on display and let people check them out. This is a World War I 101st engineer. So this would be a combat engineer. You can see he's got his axe, he's got his pick, his compass, and we found this really, really cool overseas cap that was made in Europe, made in France for him. And it's two-toned, which is really, really cool. And he's got his painted helmet hanging off the back of his backpack there. Why don't you come in here and I'll show you the oldest room in the museum. This room is dedicated to the New Haven Greys, and they are a militia unit that was organized in 1816 to protect New Haven against pirate attacks, believe it or not. In the early 1800s, we had pirates in Long Island Sound, Native American Indian attacks, and college students, of all things, in New Haven, because college kids were just as crazy back then as they are today. So a lot of these soldiers were from the New Haven area. And this room was actually housed in the old Gulf Street Armory, and Frank Carano, who was the first curator of this museum, took this apart when we moved out of there and brought it here and reassembled it. So we have a lot of great New Haven related memorabilia here. We actually have a backpack that was belonged to Antonio Dardell, who was one of the few Asian Americans that fought on the Union side, excuse me, in the Civil War. He was wounded at Chancellorsville, and he actually was allowed to keep his backpack. But what happened was a few companies were captured there, and they had these great backpacks from Connecticut. And they didn't want to give them to the Confederates, so they piled them up in front of the Confederates and burned them right in front of them. So this is one of the ones that actually made it. So it's kind of a rare backpack. And we have various medals and rings and things associated with the Grays and 102nd. And this honor roll here came out of the Gulf Street Armory. And you'll probably recognize some of the names on here. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Merlin, who's has a marker at Gettysburg. He was killed in action there, not far from where the 27th monument is located. Judea Chapman also has a marker there. Walter Osborne was in the 15th Connecticut, and he died of blood poisoning in a Confederate hospital. So most of these soldiers that served were from the New Haven area. And then right here we have a nice letter that was signed, actually sent to one of the guys was sent to one of the members of the sent to one of the members of the Grays, and it's signed by Teddy Roosevelt, which is kind of cool. And then we have frock coats. We have various images. That person up there is Alfred Terry, and he was a famous lawyer in New Haven, and he was a general during the Custer campaign, and should advise Custer to take those Gatling guns with him, but didn't happen. So, all right, if you want to come out here, I'll show you some other things. Oh God, we're at 8:15 already, huh? We have groupings here. I don't know if you saw the story I did with Laura Hutchison on Veterans Day, but this is her family's grouping here, and her great uncle was killed in action in New Guinea in World War II. He was a B-25 pilot, and his plane never got off the ground. It was strafed by a Japanese Zero, and it blew up. But what's really interesting is there's a signed letter here by Douglas MacArthur to his family, which I thought was pretty unique. So, and pictures of her great-great-grandfather, who was a pilot in World War I. And then over here, we have a great group attributed to William Warren in 17th Connecticut. Carolyn actually helped us with acquiring this grouping, and he was from Bridgeport. And what's really unique is he's got his prisoner of war medal is right there, which is very rare. You don't see Civil War prisoner of war medals. So we were very happy to get this from the family and put it on display. Okay. Oh. Another John Browning creation, BAR. I'll have to go to my cheat sheet again for this one. This one just actually came in. So this particular unit, this particular gun, was developed in 1917. See, at the time, I don't know if I mentioned it, but at the time when we went over to France, we were using a lot of British and French weapons because we were a neutral country. We weren't really prepared to go over and fight. So what happened was this gun was developed to take the place of the French Shot in the 1909 Bonnet Marcel machine guns that were issued to our forces initially when they went over. So John Browning came up with this design, and it was chambered in 30-06, and it was manufactured by a bunch of arms manufacturers. Colt, Winchester, Marlin, New England Small Arms, Royal McBee Typewriter Company, IBM, and it was 9 companies in all. The cost was $319. What a bargain, huh? When you think about what they go for nowadays on the market. 351,000 were made. They used a 20 or 40 round magazine. Infantry used to use this. They developed a tactic called walking fire in trench warfare. And what they would do is they would actually, a few gunners would get out in front and they would fire at the German trenches repeatedly so that they couldn't fire back at them, and they would eventually overwhelm them. I'm sure they took a lot of casualties. I'm sure that was something that they really didn't do extensively, because I think after a while you would definitely lose people. But this became a standard issue in the U.S. Army in 1938, and it was phased out in the 50s. It was replaced by the M60, which you're probably familiar with, and what they currently use nowadays, which is called an M249 saw. And that was phased out around 1957. But they used these right up into Vietnam, believe it or not. So this is another one of those pieces that looks like a duck, but really isn't. It's not. It looks like a real gun, but it's essentially just a couple of parts here and there. But it's a non-firing piece. You couldn't fire anything through that. It just looks really good. All right. You come over here. This is our current display. Afghanistan, Desert Storm. Captain Clark runs the ROTC program at the University of UNH, and he brought back some things from the Iraq War. This particular gentleman here, Gillo, he was in a tanker unit. He was from West Haven. Let's see. We have the screen in front of the, if you want to walk through the Korean bunker, I could show you the Korean bunker, and we have the screen in front of it, unfortunately. This just kind of gives you an idea on how difficult it was in Korea. It was extremely cold. Very dark in here, yes. My dad served in Korea. He was there for the whole Korean War, and he said it was the coldest place on the planet. Here's another one of those great dioramas that shows the Chosan Reservoir retreat. They have more Korean memorabilia. This is my dad's display here. He was a mechanic on a P-51 Mustang. He was in from 1945 till 1953. Just about the whole Korean War. He was in the 39th Fighter Squadron. This is a Vietnam display here. We have our president, vice president, Vietnam veterans, and we have a lot of different things on display from there. Get feedback. This is a Medal of Honor display here. We actually have a Navy Medal of Honor. And there's a law passed by Bush in 2005 called the Patriot Law, Stolen Valor Law. Whereas they found a guy in Long Island wearing a Medal of Honor and didn't earn it. And he got arrested. And Bush passed this law indicating that you cannot have one anymore. You cannot have a Medal of Honor. And I think it went all the way down to a Bronze Star. I could be wrong about that. but it actually was repealed by Congress because it said it trampled on your rights to own these things. But I think what they were more concerned about is people not only wearing them and didn't own them, or didn't earn them, but also trying to get benefits from the government, and they didn't deserve it. So Obama came along in 2013 and amended it and made it a little bit more specific in that it's a felony to wear a Medal of Honor if you did not earn it. The families are not supposed to have these. They're supposed to give them back to the government when that individual passes away that earned it. And here's our medal. Here's our Wall of Honor. We have about 200 veterans on there, and anyone can sign up for it. And we usually get a picture of the veteran, and we do a short synopsis of his service. We have over 200 on there, and it's pretty popular with our visitors. A lot of people sign up to do it. It doesn't cost anything. Here we have a Japanese wing that was brought back by members of the 211th Coastal Artillery. And they were actually farm boys from Brantford. They were all allowed to join together. It was before the Sullivan brothers went down, so they all were able to join, the whole neighborhood joined together, brothers, cousins, whatnot. And they went through the South Pacific, and this shows the probables that they shot down, the ones that they really shot down, destroyed, and the ones that were damaged. This gun here was carried during Vietnam, even up until today. I had a woman come in about 10 years ago, and her husband worked at Winchester and designed the receiver for the M14. And in 1962, they had a dinner for him, and they presented him with this nickel-plated M14, which is an outstanding gun. She came in, she said, my husband's been gone for about 10 years. Would you like it for the museum? I said, absolutely. So it's one of our featured items that we really love. There's a picture of Billy Benson, our president, holding one when he was in Vietnam. And then, if you come over here, I'm gonna wrap it up. I know it's going long, I know. This gun, I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Lake, who used to make subs before we had electric boat, but he was located in Bridgeport. And they would make subs, and they would actually sail them out into the Sound to check them out. So one day in 1911, one of his subs was going out with a escort boat called the Mary Ellen or Mary Jane, and they collided. And the escort boat went down, and the sub kept going. Well, a friend of mine was diving in Bridgeport Harbor, and he grabbed this, thought it was a cup, and dug down and found this deck gun there. He brought it in to me. It was covered in barnacles. It had crabs crawling out of it. And he said, do you want it for your museum? I said, yeah, we'd love to have it, but not looking like that. So basically what he did was he sandblasted it and brought it back into me with an engine lift hoist and mounted it in a pallet. And there's a plate on it that said it was made in the Brooklyn Navy Yard in 1907. So it all kind of checks out. But it's a real nice local historical link, you know. There's so many stories, so many great stories about this area, and that's really one of them. And then this is a marine display. Gordon Bergman was our vice president. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was actually involved in defending the U.S. Embassy during the Tet Offensive. So he had some great stories about that experience, kind of scary in a way. We have Lee Ermey, who you probably have heard of, and we have a signed image of him. We have some Flying Tigers information here, actually a bush jack and a Chinese flag. This is one of our best displays in the museum. The story behind this is this particular person flew with the Flying Tigers, and he was a bombardier, and he he was shot down. He flew in a B-24 and was shot down in French Indonesia, which is Vietnam. He walks out of the jungle with his parachute and makes a wedding gown for his wife out of it. And his wife wears it, and there's a picture of them down there. And there's another one that shows her in the wedding gown. But she brought the wedding gown into me, and she brought his A2 jacket into me, which is just so valuable. I mean, you just don't see things like this. I mean, I've read stories about it happening, but you know, soldiers doing this, but to actually have something like that is just incredible. And you know, this person actually, he used to march in the Brantford parades, and I used to go there with my father and mother. We used to sit on the side and watch the veterans, you know, march by. And this guy actually probably marched right by me, and I had no idea that I was going to represent him later on in life, you know, when he had passed, and I'm curator of this museum. So it's kind of interesting how everything comes full circle. This particular gentleman here was from West Haven. Actually, one of his relatives had brought this into me. Terry Gilbert, very good friend of mine, lives in Florida now. Used to live in West Haven. This particular gentleman actually went overseas. He was in the Pennsylvania Military College. He was in an academy. He went overseas, and they never found him. They don't have any record as to what happened to him. He just disappeared. So I tell people, I hope he kind of met a real rich woman from Switzerland, and that's where he's living now, and he just didn't want to come back to the United States. That's what I hope that happened to him, but nobody really knows for sure. And then we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We had a person from FX build this mannequin for us, and it looks pretty good. Carolyn donated the radio, Carolyn and Nick, nice radio from the period. And we did have a stamp album in there, but it got switched, and I have to check into that. But and his cigarette used to light up, but I'm too lazy to go in there and change the battery. I'd have to change it like every week. So so it's a real nice mannequin. It kind of shows what he looked like. And I found a December 1941 calendar for December 7th, which is really nice. We have an ashtray actually that came out of his estate right over there. So that's pretty much it. That's the 10-cent tour. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. I could have talked a lot longer, but I know you're all probably want to get home. So, but thank you all for giving me the opportunity to give you a tour of what I do.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you.